Hello, everybody. My name is Jim, and this is the Early Nerd Books of My Childhood tag by Chatty, who I name drop a lot, but you know who you know. So I'm finally getting around to doing this tag. I told her that I would do it, but I wanted to wait until after March because I read a few children's books and picture books back in March, and I wanted to do that wrap up first, just in case anything new sparked my interest and inspired me to maybe mention them when I did this tag. So now that we are on my third video in April, I figured it would be a good time to give this tag a try. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and start with the first prompt. What is the first book you remember reading? This is very easy. Pat the Bunny by Dorothy Kuhnhart. Super old. This was baby's first book. I remember reading through it. I remember specifically the bunny, obviously, and I remember there was a page in the book about dad's scratchy beard that I remember touching. This was a very tactile book. And yeah, it's certainly the first one that I remember. I think the pages were really thick. It was one of those, cardboard books, but of course it was because there was so much that you could feel. But yeah, that was the first book that I remember reading. Which series or author did you love as a child? So this is going to have a few responses because, of course, I did want to mention the Mr. Men and Little Miss series by Roger Hargreaves because that is a connection that I have to my grandma's house. She passed away a few years ago. She was 101 years old. Can you believe it? She lived an amazing life. She was an amazing woman, and she actually collected this series. She didn't have all of the books, but she did have a number of them that I would enjoy flipping through, and she would read to me when I was little. So this was definitely a series that has a special place in my heart, and it was certainly a series that I loved. Of course, I loved all Eric Carle books. The Very Hungry Caterpillar, Brown Bear, What Do You See? Books like that. I just love those. I love the illustrations, and those are ones that I remember fondly as well. But as I was growing up, Garfield by Jim Davis, the comics, amazing, awesome. Those were definitely among my favorites as well. So I had a few, and those were the ones that I felt that I needed to mention for this prompt. Can you recall a favorite picture book? No, I can't really think of one that isn't part of a series. And when it comes to series, I kind of enjoy all of them. I read the standard ones like Goodnight Moon, Where the Wild Things Are, books like that, but I can't really pick out one that I just read all the time that wasn't part of a series, and I read that series back to back, like the ones I just mentioned. So, yeah, I'm not sure about this one. However, I did read a couple. I read I Go Quiet by David Ouimet back in March. Loved that book. I wish I had it when I was a child. And I also, for this month, read A Crayon Story, which I thought was well written and covered a topic that I think more people can relate to than they believe they can. These are books that I think branch out and reach children who are dealing with different life experiences like I did as a child. And I think that's really special. I think that's important. If I were a child, I certainly would have enjoyed books like this. So I'm very happy that I waited to do this tag for April instead of in March before I read any of these children's books. Did you collect books as a child? And can you recall a loved gift or book you bought with pocket money? I mostly collected gaming guides. I don't know if those count, but I mean, you did have to read them, and they were interesting most of the time. They also kind of started my whole career as an editor because a lot of the Prima guides, especially, got things wrong back then. I can recall a few Pokemon guides that had incorrect information that I would point out and correct them. I would get a pen, I would cross them out and be like, no, this is wrong. But speaking of Pokemon, I used to really enjoy drawing them, and there was a Pokemon Handbook by Maria S. Barbo that I purchased with my pocket money. And that's the first book that I remember purchasing on my own. I remember getting it and being really excited. I had my little sketch pad. It was super tiny, but I was a little kid. I had small hands. I got the guide and I would just trace the Pokemon and start drawing them on my own. And I don't know, that's a pretty good memory. And it also taught me, about the Pokemon and gave me their Pokédex entries, and it was just fun to read. I really enjoyed that and was very happy with my purchase. What was your reading taste as a child? Is it different now? Yeah, it's different now. It's real life kind of hits you hard when you become an adult, and I feel like that is where my reading taste kind of gears toward. But my taste as a child, again, was mostly gaming guides, but I also enjoyed like the Garfield comics, and I also enjoyed scripts like the Grease script. So two stories. I forgot to mention the Garfield comics in that previous prompt. The library actually gave me a whole set of Garfield comics. I used to take them out of the library all the time, and they were falling apart. Eventually, the librarian was just like, you don't have to take these back. just take these home, keep them for yourself. They were taped up and they just didn't look that great anyway. There may have been some missing pages as well, but you really couldn't tell because each of the comic panels took up one page, so there was no real feeling of inconsistency as you read them. But she was super nice. She let me take them home, and there were about, I don't know, 6 or 7 of those books that she let me take home, and I thought that was awesome. And eventually it encouraged my parents to get me Garfield's 20th anniversary collection that went through the whole history of the Garfield comic. And I still have that anthology at my parents' house. It is falling apart, but if I can get that and bring that to my new house, I would be very happy to have it here. But anyway, so one of my other tastes as a child, I mentioned scripts like Grease. So we had the movie for Grease, and it came with the whole script, including the songs and everything like that. I could recite that movie from front to back. If I can get my hands on something, I'm going to do it. And I used to perform the play in my room with all my stuffed animals and my little people. I don't know if you know what those are. I don't know which company makes those, but they were these tiny little wooden people, and I would line them up and cast them and have them play roles. So that was a lot of fun. I did enjoy scripts, and then in high school I read The Crucible, and that kind of killed my joy for reading scripts. But yeah, Grease was a lot of fun. I'm sure my parents hated it, especially when I would perform it in the car on the way to like the beach or whatever. But name a book you fell in love with as a child. Could you reread it now? Chrysanthemum was a book that I read in March that I remembered fondly. And when I read it, I didn't really realize all of the bad messages that the book presented. It really isn't as bad as I made it seem, I don't think, in that review. But it is something that I think could be touched up a little bit better, because we don't want to teach kids that they're on their own when it comes to being bullied, and we don't want kids to love something about themselves and then make it seem like people are allowed to judge them based on that aspect that they love about themselves. Like in Chrysanthemum's case, she loved her name until she went to school and was bullied about it. We want there to be a little bit more agency. We want those kids to know that we're there to back them up and they are free to love any harmless thing that they want to love. So yeah, I don't know if I could read that again. But otherwise, it's just going to be the same books that I've been talking about this whole time. The Garfield comics, of course. Do you have books from your childhood? Which is your oldest? I don't have any at my new house, but like I said, I would like to bring some books over just so I could have them here. I don't know which one is the oldest. I don't even know if my parents have Pat the Bunny anymore. That would be the oldest. It could very well be that we either donated those or we sold them at a yard sale way back, because my parents, we grew older and they were just kind of taking up space. So I don't know. Which book would you love a child in your life to read? I mean, I'm sure there's so many more out there than I Go Quiet and Read, but I mean, I guess I could just mention those. But I feel like books today are so much more diverse and inclusive, and I think that is really important for kids today to read and soak in. So honestly, I don't know if I can pick one that I read that I feel is important for a child in my life to read today, but I'm sure there are so many out there that would be amazing for children to read today. Maybe I could revisit this prompt, and when I read another picture book or children's book, I just need to get out there. I need to look. What makes you excited about children's books today? Well, I kind of just said it. The inclusivity, the variety, the diversity in children's books. Back when I was in school, I mean, there were probably books out there, but they weren't read in class because maybe they would have sparked too much controversy or something. And children's books today are still doing that. But I also think that more authors are stepping out and are creating books for kids who don't really fit that little box that a lot of people think they should fit in. There are books about the LGBTQ. There are more books about people of color. There are books about autism. There are books about introversion. There are books that cover a wide variety of topics that I don't remember in my day because they weren't promoted and they weren't available. So it's really cool to see that, and that really makes me excited about children's books today. What do you want to see more of? I certainly want more of that, but I also want to encourage adults to branch out and read children's books if they don't understand a concept or they don't understand something that makes a person human, because really good children's books have a way of breaking things down in a way that's very relatable and easy to digest. And I think that if adults were to crack open a children's book every once in a while, they would be able to comprehend certain things a little bit better and gradually be able to join in conversations where maybe they just don't feel comfortable. They want to be allies or they want to understand a certain thing, but they just aren't comfortable because they don't know enough. And I feel like children's books, they really do break that down and make it relatable. Sometimes, like I said, when I mentioned the book Red, a crayon story, it could be a situation where you find yourself relating to the main character in the book, even if it isn't about you. And that sort of thing starts to spark empathy between people and understanding. And that is certainly what we want to teach children. The more books are written that way, the more I want to encourage adults to kind of dig down there in those books that are geared towards kids so they can start to understand people a little bit better. So yeah, that's all for this tag. Sorry if it got a little bit deep at the end, but I do think it's important to talk about. Obviously, the last prompt is to tag people. I don't know enough to tag, but if anybody wants to do it, feel free. Just jump right in there, do it. It's a really cute tag. Thank you, Chatty, for creating this. It's very new, so not a lot of people have done it. So if you do it, you're going to have to jump. But otherwise, I've been Jim. You've been great. Happy reading.